So I guess we should just start off by introducing ourselves. My name is Anna Ka'ahanui. I'm co-founder and director of tours and experiential programs for Capital Nature.
And I'm Stella Tarnay, co-founder and executive director of Capital Nature.
And both of us are Virginia Master Naturalists in both Fairfax and Arlington County chapters. We're both on the steering committee of the Washington Area Citizen Science Network. And we're both on the regional leadership team for the DC City Nature Challenge, which we'll be talking about later in the program. Next.
So a little bit about Capital Nature for those of you that have not met us before or know about our work. So our mission is really to bring nature into the lives of Washington area metro humans and visitors for the well-being of people and also the species that we share a region with. We think well-being belongs to all species. And our vision for the region is pretty darn green. We envision a Washington, D.C. region where there's a culture of nature engagement and stewardship, where daily experience with nature is something that people can experience. And we support the well-being of our ecologies, humans, and the species we share a region with. Next. So how do we do it? So, it's kind of a big green idea, and many wonderful organizations such as A&S have been doing a lot for the environment over the years. And so our contribution is that we've developed a nature information and story hub. And if you go to Capital Nature's website, you can see capitalnature.org calendar. And that's kind of the core of our hub idea. We collect cool nature programming from organizations in Northern Virginia, DC, and in Maryland. And if you look on the calendar this week, you'll see flying squirrel introductions and campfires with naturalists and this webinar and lots of other events. So we hope to become a hub of cool information about all things nature to serve the people of the region. Anna, you've got the next one.
Sure. Another aspect of what we do at Capital Nature is we not only promote really cool nature events in the region, but we also create them as well. And so we're trying to do really interesting, just interesting outdoor nature experiences, a lot of times with citizen science, also known as community science, and forest bathing. And also we strive to reach audiences in underrepresented communities. So we're trying to give more people access to nature.
And we have our roots in the biophilic cities movement. Many of you might know E.O. Wilson and his work. So that's kind of our inspiration. And so we think nature can really inform policy decisions and city and urban planning and architecture, as well as direct experience. So we actually provide assistance to organizations and local governments for nature-based strategies. Next. So what is community science? Many of you know the answer already, but it's a really great question to ask. So also known as citizen science, it's when curious or concerned people collaborate with scientists to gather data in real time in the real world to advance knowledge on topics they care about. And observation is its primary activity. Next.
So why is it important? Now more than ever, it gives us an opportunity to connect more deeply with nature. I don't think people realize that just being outdoors and collecting information and making observations, they're able to contribute to scientific research, and we'll go over how to do that. And also, when you're contributing with these projects, you're helping to support the well-being of your community and the environment.
Mm-hmm. Next.
So you can get involved both as an individual, or you can get involved in a group. And so what we're finding is there's so many projects where people can just participate by going out by themselves or in small family groups or pods. But then there are also with the epidemic, people have managed to create safe environments for small groups to go out and also participate. So it just depends on what your comfort level is, but just know that there's options for both individual and group projects.
Next. And so, as Anna mentioned, one of the reasons to do community or citizen science is to connect with nature. And I think a lot of us have like a favorite bird or a favorite plant or a favorite animal. Bees, for example, I love bees. So if you have a species that you would really love to know more about, there's probably a community science project out there that will help you do that. So if you love bees, you can connect with the Xerces Society and be part of Bumblebee Watch, or to connect with the Honeybee Conservancy and take part in a bee blitz. And of course, if you're one of the ANS members and friends who themselves put out pollinator gardens, this is a great kind of collaborative project that you can do. You plant the native garden to welcome the bees and the pollinators, and then you can actually observe and document what's showing up. Next.
And if you like other different types of bugs and critters, especially crickets, katydids, and moths, there are opportunities for you as well. Stella and I participated this summer in the 9th annual DC Baltimore Cricket Crawl. And what that means is a bunch of us, you got educated by about 6 different species in the area. And on that evening, everybody went out after dark to listen to the sounds and to make observations of what species that they were hearing. We also participated in National Moth Week, which is really exciting. People don't really think about moths, but moths are beautiful. They're pollinators. They're important to our ecosystems. And so lots of folks did projects where they put UV lights out at night to attract the moths and observe them and make observations. So just a couple different examples of some of the creepy crawly projects you can get involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Next.
And of course, who doesn't love monarchs and butterflies? So if you're into butterflies, cicadas, and dragonflies, for example, there's a project out there that you can participate in. And especially monarchs. Monarch Joint Venture is a great joint project to check out. There are literally dozens of observation projects underneath that collaborative initiative. So one of them is Monarch Watch, and that's the very famous one that films have been made about, where monarchs are tagged in their flight from Canada all the way down to Central America and Mexico. And that's a great project to look up. And if you're into cicadas, and we'll all be into cicadas next year because, as you know, many of you know, we'll have the 17-year cicadas coming out next year. So even though there are different species that come out annually, next year is going to be a really exciting time, and it'll be a great year to be observing officially as a community scientist. And of course, dragonflies are so beautiful and so, that's my cell phone, and so charismatic that you can also participate in a community science project to observe those. Next. And herps. Now, Anna and I are both total fans of like lizards and salamanders and frogs. And here in the area, you can participate in the National Frog Watch Project and also through the Virginia Herpetological Society in things like box turtle surveys. And those are really wonderful projects to participate in. I actually trained through the District Department of the Environment for Frog Watch, and we held classes where we learned about the different native indigenous frogs to the Mid-Atlantic and to the DC area. We listened to their calls, we learned to identify the calls, and then we went out in small groups after dark to listen to them, or we could listen individually. So once those are back on post-COVID, they're suspended now. But if you can connect to those, that's a really fun project. And of course, individually, you can go and listen now. Next.
If you love birds, there's lots to do. During the pandemic, people have just been noticing bird sound because they're home more often and there's less like noise pollution and less planes flying over the air. And so people are listening to birds. 3 organizations, including the Audubon Naturalist Society, are hosts for this evening. They, along with DC Audubon Society and the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, they all offer programmings about bird awareness, bird watching, bird education, and bird conservation. There are numerous counts and surveys that happen, which I'll speak about in a second. And they just, anyone can do it. You can do it from your backyard. You can do it from a local park. You can do it solo. You can do it single. Just so many different opportunities. Audubon Naturalist Society was conducting Saturday morning walks, but I believe those have been suspended. Other surveys and counts that I mentioned that you can get involved with There's the Christmas bird count, which is actually one of the oldest citizen science projects going. It's this is 121st year, where people are going to go out from mid-December to early January in groups to make bird counts. And that's through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And they're sort of the premier folks in all things birds. During the year, they also offer another survey called the Great Backyard Bird Count, where literally you can just look in your backyard. It's not, you don't have to, you can go in your backyard, look out your window, go to local parks. Same with Project Feeder Watch. It's also very similar. If you happen to have a feeder, or if you have plants that serve birds, you can count those birds for a survey. I've actually done the training for the Eastern Bluebird Nest Box Watch. I haven't been able to volunteer for it yet, but it's on my list. And basically they're a network of these nest boxes all around, and different teams of volunteers go and monitor them. And then one of the coolest bird related programs that we were coming across in our research was the dawn chorus. And if you're not familiar, the dawn chorus is the sound, the beautiful sound that birds make in the morning as dawn starts up. That's when they're very communicative and speaking to each other. And so this is sort of a project that's both a combination of citizen science and art, because they've encouraged people, they did a project back in May where they encouraged people to go outside and make recordings of their birds at dawn, and submitted those and created a map and created a soundscape so that people could experience the different birds around the world. And it was a really cool project. Next.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite projects as well. And of course, at the core of all of this is the natural environment, right? All of the plants and the trees and the water and the air that make up our world. And so if you love trees, there's several ways that you can get involved. I know a number of you are involved with planting trees through Casey Trees. And also pre-pandemic, you could participate in tree surveys where a group of folks go out, community scientists, and actually collaborate and work together to identify the tree, to measure it, its diameter, to evaluate its height using basic geometry and these fun instruments. Also to assess the condition of the tree. And there are surveys of trees all over the city. And both Anna and I participated in those, and they are great group projects. We hope they'll start up again soon. But individually, you can also continue identifying trees through iNaturalist, which is a great app that we'll share about if you don't know about it yet. And you can individually become a tree observer. And as many of us know, and we love the fact that Washington, D.C. is the city of trees. And this book, which is now in its 4th or 5th edition, was written by Melanie Chukas Bradley, who is with us this evening. So if you become a community scientist, you can practice to become a naturalist like Melanie. Next. Anna, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, that's okay.
Oh.
If you love the ocean, and I'm originally from Hawaii, and I love going swimming in the ocean, and what I was pleased to discover as REEF, which stands for Reef Environmental Education Foundation, they actually do community science in the ocean, where they're doing I'm still a bird on the brain, fish counts, fish identification counts. And so you can get training, and they happen to do these all around the world. So if you happen to be on vacation, you could actually be doing community science at the same time. And so I think I might have to drag my husband into something like that in a future vacation. Next. So the folks at NASA developed some program called GLOBE, and they have a different couple protocols and apps that were developed to make observations for community science. And the first one that we learned about was Globe Clouds. And so literally, if you love looking up at the clouds, you can, by taking pictures of these clouds, you can help participate by submitting these observations, and it helps meteorologists map changes in our weather patterns and kind of gauge and compare the statistics. And so that's really helpful just by simply taking pictures of clouds at any given time. Then they expanded that app to include other types of things that one could observe. For the eclipse one, it's interesting. When the Earth is eclipsed, we experience these drastic temperature differences, and so people from all over the world can use this app to log in what the temperature is during an eclipse. You can look at mosquitoes, you can look at tree cover and land cover, and so these are just some of the examples that NASA program is using to get people engaged in community science. Next.
And of course, if you're curious about the natural world in general, right? Many of us are kind of omnivores when it comes to nature. We just really like to see what's out there and living and thriving and growing. So you can do that as well. And again, our recommended app would be iNaturalist because it allows you to observe that and to document it, and also get advice and ideas from others who are doing the same thing to help you identify the species. And on the left, you see our friend Sage Raindancer, who is a forest therapy guide and also does observations as a community scientist. And here he was on a walk with us in Noma, which is a busy urban neighborhood in DC, where there's a lot of hidden nature to find. And so he was observing, looking at some native grasses that were actually there. And in the center, you've got a group of very young observers that were participating in the Anacostia BioBlitz, making all kinds of observations around the river, in the river, and the green areas around that. And then to the right, we have a couple that took part in the City Nature Challenge in 2019, and they were making all kinds of observations in Oxen Run Park. And that's a great park if you haven't had a chance to go. It's got a small creek running through it and all kinds of things that are kind of coming up from the ground that you can observe. Next. And so moving kind of beyond ourselves, right? There's such a great joy in community science observation and being naturalists. But community science has some other possibilities and purposes that are also really important to remember and that we can all participate in. So through community science, you can actually support community health. You can become an advocate for environmental justice, such as this very intrepid and strong group in the Buzzard Point neighborhood of DC did. And a group of women in the neighborhood organized because they were noticing the air quality was really, really going downhill after a lot of industrial uses and plants and development was being built around their neighborhood. And they were seeing their kids getting sick and not getting a lot of attention. So they collaborated with the University of the District of Columbia, with researchers there, and they tested air quality throughout the neighborhood over an extended period of time. And then they presented that data to DC government to make their case that more needed to be done to protect the neighbors in that neighborhood. And that's an ongoing project. Next. And if you want to protect our waterways, our area is almost as well known for its rivers, right, as it is for its trees. There are several really fine organizations doing community science. I bet some of you have already participated in their projects. Anacostia Riverkeeper, Anacostia Watershed Society, and Kingman and Heritage Islands. And I'm just going to tell you a bit more about those projects.
Next. So the Anacostia River Creeper Group, their goal is to protect and help clean up the Anacostia River. And they have a very robust water quality monitoring program. They have several monitoring sites, 29 across DC and Maryland. They've trained over 120 people. They've gathered over 500 samples. And what are they looking at? These little boxes that we have here are the parameters when they do their different samples. They're looking at levels of fecal bacteria, air temperature, acidity and pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, turbidity, and water temperature. And so if this is something that you would like to participate, you definitely want to look up the folks at Anacostia Riverkeeper, because their goal is to get it to the point where the Anacostia will be swimmable again. Next. Also, we mentioned the Anacostia Watershed Society, and as well in conjunction with the Friends of Kingman and Heritage Islands. They have a great program called Muscle Power. And what they do is they catch and release mussels. They gauge their sizes. One adult mussel can filter between 10 to 20 gallons of water a day. And so right now they've been dealing with a little bit over 17,000 mussels in the Anacostia River. And if you were to add up all of the water that they could filter, it would fill over 98 Olympic swimming pools. And so what they can do is they find them, they tag them, the different species, and then they go back and they survey it again, and they make recordings of the sizes and how far they've traveled. And so this is a very easy 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 activity to participate in. People can look for stuff, people can tag stuff. And so it's just a great way, because mussels are a wonderful bioindicator of what's going on for the health of the Anacostia River. Next. And even our host, the Audubon Natural Society, they have a water monitoring program, one that's been around for quite some time, actually. And if you're not familiar with stream monitoring is when you have folks kind of skim the water and also turn over some rocks and try to identify macroinvertebrates, so little miniature critters that are in the stream. And these stream critters indicate levels of pollution and the overall health of a stream. And so people are able to gather these little critters, look at them under a microscope, and identify them. Next. And what's great about this program is this particular group of volunteers, they're trained to be able to identify these on site. And so because they're able to do that, they don't have to collect samples and put them in alcohol and send them off to the lab. And so that's better for the critters, obviously. And so this is just a great way for people to get involved by taking these water samples and helping figure out the overall health, which is ultimately going to affect the whole ecosystem in the area. Next.
Thanks, Anna. And I bet that on this call, we have a handful of ANS volunteers, and you all could tell us more about what it's like to participate in that program. So we'll look forward to that at the end of our presentation. And if you want to protect wildlife in a more direct way, right, it's really great to observe, but really wanting to make a difference, there are a few local programs that I would recommend. So on the left, there's Lights Out DC, which is organized by City Wildlife. And as you know, that's a wonderful center that rescues and rehabilitates wildlife throughout the city. And there's an important program that they sponsor that involves community scientists going out in the early morning hours in the spring and in the fall when migrating birds are coming through and documenting the bird strikes on buildings. And unfortunately, billions of birds die annually as they migrate because of the way that we design and light our buildings. So this important project has been going on for about 10 years, and the volunteers find the birds, they document the location, the species of the bird, and then if the bird is already dead, they actually collect the birds in a freezer. It sounds kind of weird, but they collect the birds, and then at the end of the season, they give them to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History to support research. So it's a really important project, and it has been affecting actually policy. It's brought more attention to the need for zoning regulations, building regulations, and different ways of dealing with light in buildings. And then the next one on the right is the more cheerful Neighborhood Nest Watch project, and that's a project that's designed especially for families. So families can turn both their backyards and also schoolyards into research labs to look at how birds are doing in terms of laying nests, laying eggs and hatchlings. And scientists come in, they tag local birds, and then the children and their parents can watch how bird life develops and how the birds are doing as far as reproduction. So Nest Watch, very popular program. And to the right, bigger species, coyotes, which are making their way into DC and the metro region. And this is a new project, the DC Coyote Project. And they invite those of us that may have heard or seen coyotes to report them through the project. And really the intent is to make relations between humans living in the neighborhoods and coyotes kind of more harmonious, and to help us understand how we can cohabit neighborhoods of DC with our fellow creatures, in this case, coyotes. So that citizen science project is just kicking off, and it would be a great one to help get off the ground. And of course, on the far right, chipmunks, one of my favorite animals. The DC Department of Energy and Environment is tracking chipmunks and cottontails and other creatures. And any information you can help the biologists of that agency know, it can actually help them to promote better conservation policies. Next. And one of my favorite projects, I just learned about it a month or two ago, is in Loudoun County. you can not only protect local wildlife, but really affect policy in a broader way. So the Wildlife Conservancy, through the help of donors, was able to purchase an 87-acre tract of land that's now called the J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. And a group of community scientists who were members of the Conservancy started researching the entire piece of land and all of its landscape and waterways. And they're systematically doing tree studies, butterfly studies, plant studies, and also studies of the vernal pools, which were discovered to have the only known sightings of fairy shrimp in all of Loudoun County. And this has helped that piece of land to be considered a special wetland and a special conservation zone. And all of their research is really informing county biologists, county policymakers, and development in the county. Next. And highlighting just a few of the species that the Conservancy is targeting, they're noticing and wanting to promote the growth of populations of the painted lady butterfly, the fairy shrimp, which we mentioned, and the American woodcock. And all of these are creatures that may go unnoticed in many of the green spaces of Loudoun County unless a concerned group of citizens and residents starts paying attention to them and starts observing and documenting them. So a really important and notable project. Next.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about how observations are made. Obviously, we've all been observing nature and its phenomena for a very long time. And it typically starts off, or probably it was always manual. It was always written records. It's only until recently in latest technology that we started developing apps, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I just wanted to kind of show that typically when a group goes out, there's usually a keeper of the data, a keeper of the clipboard. On the left there, that is a dragonfly BioBlitz, and we'll talk about BioBlitzes a little bit later. Dragonfly BioBlitz in Reston. In the middle, we have some stream monitoring for water quality with the Audubon Naturalist Society. And at the end on the far right there, that is one of the muscle power activities where folks are gathering and measuring mussels. Next.
And there's a long tradition of manual observations by community and amateur scientists. And just to remind you that it goes back many hundreds of years to the astronomers who made some of the most important findings of our heavens, men and women who were observing the sky. The young boy here from the 1930 photograph, who was one of the weather monitors for the National Weather Service. And you may have heard of him, Billy Barr. He's slightly eccentric, but very well known now weather observer in the Western Rockies. And he's been collecting information for 40 years on the weather, the snow, and the animals and their habits and patterns in the Western Colorado Rockies. And this has become really just a treasure trove of information for climate scientists who were looking for that kind of information for the Rocky Mountain region. So really, community science is a very open science field. It's one that many people who would not necessarily be invited into the halls of science can participate in. And they've made some of the greatest contribution to ecological knowledge and to scientific knowledge around the planet. Next. And if you haven't heard enough about the projects, both old and new, you can find another 3,000 projects on scistarter.com. We've picked some of our favorites, but there's so much going on around the globe, and you might enjoy looking through to see what else is happening. And we're also developing a citizen science resource page on capitalnature.org. We've got some basic info, but we're actually fundraising to do a project that would make it a real hub of citizen science information. You could go to it for information about projects, for sharing of experiencing, sharing of data. We're looking forward to developing that. Next.
So one of our favorite apps to use for community science is called iNaturalist. It's a very simple app to use. This picture on the left, we have, again, Melanie Chukas Bradley. She is doing a tree walk over at the Capitol grounds during the City Nature Challenge. So you'll notice that she's showing off some seeds or buds from a particular tree, and people are standing around making observations. So what does that mean? So using iNaturalist, it's a social platform. It's a network where you can record what you see in nature, meet other people who love to observe nature, learn about what you're looking at, because a lot of times when we're taking pictures of things, we don't know what we're looking at. And then also you can contribute to science. And for me, that's the biggest mind blown moment is when I realized that you could take pictures on your phone and it contribute to science. Next. So literally anyone who has a device, you can use your camera as well. You can go out there, and if you see something, whether it be an ant, it's a mushroom, a tree, if you can take a picture of it, an identifiable picture, a picture that's not too blurry, that's crisp, you can do this with your family. You can take that picture and upload it into the app of iNaturalist, and we'll talk about that in a second. Next. The elements of an observation for iNaturalist, so here are the 5 major elements. It's going to record who you are as the user, what you saw, when you saw it, so it's going to capture the date and time, the evidence of what you saw, which is typically photographs, as well as could be possibly sound files, sound bites updated, and then where you saw it, so it would be geotagged as the location of where this was observed. Next. What I like about iNaturalist is it works across platforms. So while most people use it in the field on their phones, they have a very robust desktop interface. And so there are many more tools and search engines and ways to relate to the community and do searching of projects and people on the desktop. So I highly recommend, if you create an account, to both explore it on your phone and also on the desktop. Next. So really, it's as easy as downloading the app from the App Store or Google Play, and create your free iNaturalist account. We would like to note that iNaturalist asks that account holders are 13 years old or older. If you have a family with a bunch of kids, someone who is 13 or older, or the parent or the guardian in a group, could be the holder of the account, but everyone can help contribute to find things to make observations with. Next. So I'm just going to walk you through very quickly on how a typical observation would go. You would take a picture, and again, a picture that's in focus of one thing. You wouldn't want to take a picture of 4 things, because people in iNaturalist, and there are about 1 million users worldwide, they wouldn't know what you're trying to identify. So you want to make it really clear what you're trying to take a picture. You'll take that picture. You'll move over to the second screen there. You'll see a plus sign where you're encouraged to take more than one picture. So maybe from the top, from the side, from the bottom, what the leaves look like, depending on what you're taking a picture of. Then you'll see a little button there that says, what did you see? And so iNaturalist, using artificial intelligence, is going to make some suggestions as to what you're looking at. And we'll get to that in a second. If you look down at the bottom of panel 2 there, it's just going to record all that metadata of that observation, where it was, if it's in a particular project, what date and time you observed it. And so all this is captured with your image. The third little panel there, this is where iNaturalist is going to look at that picture and look in its database and see if it can make some the top 10 recommendations. Moving on to the next slide. And how does it do that? It is artificial intelligence. So they have, I think, probably close to 20 million photos now in their database. And so that picture that you take is compared to all those millions and millions of photos to try to come up with an approximate guess. So you may not know what kind of violet it is, and if you mark that violet, that's great, because there's so many other users around the world that are violet specialists, and they're going to know exactly what kind. If you got a good enough picture that shows the leaves and the flower and where it is, chances are you're going to get people to help you get to a species level identification. So that's what I wanted to point out, that this is a crowdsourced validation. It's scientists, it's nature lovers, it's everybody contributing on this interface to help people make identifications. Next.
Ah, that's me. Thank you. So you can join both local and global projects in iNaturalist, and these are just two that Anna actually put up for us to look at. So we've got a Rock Creek project, so you can actually contribute to observations in Rock Creek and see, what's growing and what's scurrying out there, and see what other folks have found. And that's a really fun project. And if you want to think globally, the Half Earth project is a great one to connect to. But Anna, you've got a tip about. The way that people can find
Oh
local projects.
yeah, yeah. We were talking about that today. Basically, if you're on your phone and you're looking at your settings, there's a button called Projects, and if you hit Projects, one of the tabs that's going to pop up is Projects Nearby. So if you have your location services turned on and you happen to be in DC or Maryland, it's going to bring up a list of all the different existing iNaturalist projects. So I thought that was very helpful. I was in a park a few weeks ago, wasn't sure like if there were any iNaturalist projects around, and there was, and I joined it. All you have to do is join it, and then anything that you observe will go towards that particular project. Next. Another app that we also like to use is a companion app to iNaturalist. It's called Seek by iNaturalist, and it was the same developers. And it was really developed for family and kids and not to be for scientific observation. But what it is you literally hold up your phone over something, such as these monarch butterflies, and the little green dots there that go across the top, those are the different levels of taxonomic identification. And if you get all the way to the right, that means that you've gotten to the species level. Sometimes if you're looking at a green leaf, for example, it might not be able to get you to the species just by looking at that one leaf. So it might get you down to the family level or the genus level. So literally you don't even have to take the picture, and it's going to help you start identifying things. So if you're out walking in a park or in your backyard and you just want to hover your camera over with this app, you might be able to get some clues as to what is back there. Next. And once you do hit your camera button to capture that image, it's going to tell you what it thinks it is, the scientific name, whether or not it's native or not, or introduced, a little bit about it. It's phenology, meaning, when does it typically, what is its season? When does it typically leaf out and grow? Its regionality, it's going to show you how many observations around the world have been observed. So all kinds of tidbits at your fingertips just by snapping that one picture. And on the right, what was great is what they did is they did badges. So you can earn badges for different things that you observe. And they also do monthly challenges. So, I always get excited when I open up my app and it says, oh, Anna, you've identified 8 out of 10 for this month's tree challenge. So that's exciting. So it's just a fun way to get people engaged. Next.
And another app that we like, even though you won't be making direct observations, is Picture This. And that's a good intro app if you want to get used to the idea of using your phone to identify things. And it's a really good one for plants and gardens in your neighborhood. And you might just want to try that out before you leap into iNaturalist, or if you need a bit of an easier start. Next.
And if you're into birds, the eBird app is pretty much the main tool that those different surveys and counts that we talked about earlier. You get your free account by downloading the app. You push the start button, and basically if you're taking a 30-minute walk in your area, you're just recording the number of birds and by species of what you see. Then you'll have an ongoing list, a dashboard that kind of shows you what you've observed by month and by year. You can compare it between years and such. And there's just a full list of all the different, you can even have the species loaded up by your region. So right now I have, I think, all like the eastern birds set up. There's no reason for me to have western birds because I'm not looking at western birds. So all these different tools that you can use for birding. And then we have our cute friend's daughter. She is quite observant, and she's even created her own bird blind that we have another picture of, where she created a box where she got in to look at birds, which is awesome. Next. Cicada Safari. Stella mentioned that, we have the emergence of the cicadas coming in the spring. And so there's an app that they've created what you can put on your phone where you can make observations. Now they're looking for specific species. There are so many different species of cicada. And so that'll all be explained in the app. But if you happen to start finding them in the spring, you can make observations and submit them, because they're going to do counts, because they want to compare that to sort of the estimated emergent sites and quantities and such like that. So you're basically helping out the scientists by submitting your observations. Next. Our folks at Audubon Naturalist Society, they have a program called Creek Critters, and they have an app for it. And so what you can do is it helps them do their stream monitoring. They have about 30 different critters on there that you'll learn how to identify them. It's going to walk you through the protocol for collecting the critters, how to identify them, and then how you can put this all in the stream health report. And so this is all part of the water quality monitoring program that Audubon Naturalist Society offers. Next.
So, and just aware of our time I want to make sure we leave enough time for discussion. So I'll move through this fairly quickly. I think we both can. So a quick highlight on BioBlitzes. Again, you've probably even participated in one, but a BioBlitz is kind of a census of nature, and it can take place over a specific amount of time. It could be 1 day or 4 days or even a whole month, a specific place, and it could be one species or the multitude of species in a particular area. Next. So one of our favorite BioBlitzes is the City Nature Challenge. We're now in our 5th year in Washington, D.C., and we really like this BioBlitz because it includes everybody in the metropolitan region. And over a period of days in late spring, at the end of April, we can explore what's growing, what's budding, what birds are we seeing, what's slithering. And life is just about coming back. And so it's a very optimistic experience. And in 2020, we went beyond 4 days because we thought, people really need to get outdoors. So our organizing group for the City Nature Challenge decided to make all of April City Nature Month. And if you look at the numbers, they're really quite something. We made over 68,000 observations. We covered over 3,600 species. We had almost 4,000 observers and just under 2,000 identifiers who helped us build up the species list, the observation list for 2020. It was a great experience, and we encourage you to participate in 2021. Next.
So speaking of 2021, this week, the leadership teams around the world are starting to have their first calls. So we'll be participating in those this week. They've already announced the dates for next year. In April, they'll be having the 4 or 5 day observation period, followed by a 5-day uploading and IDing, where everybody kind of helps each other ID their species, and then they'll announce the results. And so if you're interested in that, definitely be following Capital Nature, because we'll be really involved in those activities. Next. We just had the Anacostia River BioBlitz. It was awesome. It was a weekend. It was just like the 15th through the 18th. It was great because it was, we had to cancel all of the live events, but people did go out on their own and in small groups. So we were happy to see that the observations were more than last year. The species that identified over 800 were more than last year. And if you look over to the right, you can see it by taxa and see the difference between 2019 and 2020. I am a fungi fanatic, and so I was very pleased to see that fungi had 23 last year, but 113 this year, and 18 of those I checked were ones that I made, so I was very excited about that. And slime molds, another thing that I love to take pictures of. There were no representatives last year, but 3 were added this year, so that was super cool. So this is something that happens every year, the Anacostia River BioBlitz. Next.
And if you're still wanting to get into a BioBlitz, you can actually participate in several right now. We're in the middle of the Northern Virginia Nearby Nature BioBlitz, and you can participate in that through November 14th. And you can find that on the Capital Nature calendar. So just go to the calendar and you can find more information. Next. Making quick reference to several really fun BioBlitzes in the region. Hopefully they'll happen again. There was a bug BioBlitz in Fairfax County in 2019, and the wonderful Virginia Herpetology Survey that Anna very enthusiastically participated in this summer. And it's a quieter time now, as you know, and so we've been making more sightings of some of the harder to find creatures, especially the amphibians and the herps. So some interesting findings in 2020, and I suppose that's a silver lining of the pandemic period that we're in. Next. And this week, you can just dive right into Bat Week and just go ahead and Google Bat Week or look for it on Facebook and your social media. And there are various ways that you can participate in, even though bats are a little bit hard to find, challenging to hear, of course, but there are many ways you can participate in. And if you live in the city with lots of lights, you might even be able to catch them hunting. Next.
So as we draw to a close, we just wanted to highlight that all of these programs that we've talked about this evening are very easy to join. You literally, if you're interested in something, Google it along with community or citizen science, and there will probably be a project that's right for you. You literally get trained, we'll find out what their protocol is, sign up for any particular projects, go monitor and make your observations and submit your data. It is simple as that. Those are the 4 basic steps of most of the projects that we've spoken about tonight. So we highly encourage you, if you're interested in becoming a more engaged observer, to do that. Next. And most of all, it's all about having fun. We all love being out in nature, but make it fun. It shouldn't be a chore. You should be observing things that you love and doing it with people that you care about and doing it for your community. We have lots of different people here that are super happy with their engagement outside with community science. And so we encourage you to do the same. Next.
And just quickly, before we open up for questions, we invite you to participate in 2 events that we're co-organizing with the NOMA bid. Anna is going to be doing a nature immersion experience later this week and through November. You can get up early in the morning and have an immersive forest bathing experience right from your home with Anna. And it's free thanks to our friends at the NOMA bid. There'll be a nice, relaxing beginning of the day event if you'd like to join her for that. And then we are doing a walk in the NOMA bid neighborhood on November 7th. And we're going to be discovering the old nature. NOMA is a very exciting new district, lots of skyscrapers, big buildings going up. But in the back is some interesting old nature backyards, old trees, and we'll be exploring those. And indeed, we're going to be using iNaturalist to document what we see. Next.
So thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been our pleasure to kind of share all these different programs that we're passionate about. We're such nature nerds. Here's our contact information if you have any additional questions, as well as our iNat handles. So if you actually go on iNaturalist and want to follow what I'm observing or what Stella's observing, those are our handles there. We encourage you, as we mentioned, to visit our website, capitalnature.org, and definitely click on the calendar page, because we do add hundreds of events every month to our calendar. So definitely check those out, and please follow us on social media. Next.
And now back over to you, Serenella. We welcome questions and any shares that those of you out there in Zoom world have about community science projects that you've participated in.
Thank you to you both, Stella and Anna, for a wonderful summary of many of the tools that we have available. It's your time to ask questions, have comments for our speakers tonight. So whether if you want to use the chat box or your voice to ask your question, feel free to do so right now.
And can you stop sharing the screen?
Sure.
Thank you. We can see people.
Hello, if I may ask a question. My name is Claire. Hi, this was really interesting, very comprehensive. How much do you understand about how much sharing goes on among these apps? Because if we theoretically, I could contribute to iNaturalist and the Xerces and all these other things and the Maryland biodiversity. How much do they share with each other? Should we be sending our photos to multiple sites, or what's going to be the best bang for our buck?
Do you want me to speak to that, Stella, or?
The truth is that we're taking our best guesses, and from the conversations we've heard is that there probably is not a whole lot of sharing going on between the platforms right now. And so if you want to contribute to both eBird and iNaturalist, then you probably want to send your info to both eBird and iNaturalist. The Loudoun County group that I mentioned is sharing their information across multiple platforms. So they have that as a strategy. So I imagine that you probably would want to do the same, unless you've heard something else.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same exact thing. I know that question has come up. We've been on We've been on some programs with the DC Audubon Society, I think, where that's come up. People said, "Oh, why should I do eBird?" Well, and actually, we have a very good friend and colleague, our friend Carrie from iNaturalist, who lives locally and works for them. And so we go to her with our questions. And basically, she explained that the protocols for how information is collected for eBird is very different from iNaturalist observations. And so it's like apples and oranges. So on the back end, they don't really speak to each other very conveniently. So in that respect, that's why you would be wanting to make separate observations, in my opinion. And for me, when you say both most bang for your buck, I mean, I'm kind of biased, but iNaturalist, I feel, is the tool that's used for the majority of many of these projects. And then you'll see, like the Audubon Naturalist Society, they have a specific one that's specific to their project. So you would want to use their tool when you're working on their projects. It's a great question. Thank you, Claire.
You're very welcome.
Mention
Thank you.
that the Maryland Biodiversity Project is incorporating data from the iNaturalist platform. They're curating the data, so not everything gets downloaded, but most of it should.
Okay.
I wanted to just the organization that a lot of the data from iNaturalist flows into is called GBIF, and that stands for Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So that's kind of like where a lot of people's programs data gets sucked into, is GBIF.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or is there anyone on the call that would like to share about any of the programs maybe that we've spoken about, or maybe we've missed that you want to mention? We'd love to hear about some programs, other programs that we could talk about.
Before you do that, this is Judy Taylor. Could I ask a quick question about winter use of iNaturalist for plants? My concern is I see a plant that I'm sure iNaturalist could have identified when it was in bloom, or there were fruits or something. Any tips for, I assume it gets much more difficult in winter when you don't have as much information available. Are there any tips as to how to take better photos, or should I just wait till spring?
I think, some species, they have dried out fruits and things that happen, in their phenology that you can still identify them, even I remember I gave a presentation with Katja Schultz on making photographs for iNaturalist, and I remember she presented a slide that said, don't think that you always have to do it when things are blooming, because there's still plants that that have leaf shapes and configurations and attachments to the stems that you can still glean that information even though it's in wintertime.
Okay.
So I think as long as you get as much detail as possible, I think that's really going to help out because there are plant experts out there, right, that know these plants intimately. I don't, but if you capture the right kind of information, I would imagine that people will be able to help you with that. Yeah.
Okay, so even if the if it doesn't automatically identify it, then other people likely will.
I didn't mention that, but when you're making observations, folks, don't leave it blank, because it's going to come up in the database as unknown. And the folks that are working on the back end of iNaturalist, and even the users, when you see a bunch of unknown stuff, you're like, oh, what is this? But if you had at least said it's a plant, there are people that you can set up filters on the desktop interface where if you're like a fungi fanatic like I am, you can filter it so like even regionally, like anytime someone makes a mushroom observation or fungi observation in the DC area, I might get pinged about it. So there are different specialists out there, that are gonna hone in on that information and help identify. So as long as you get it to the least common denominator that you feel comfortable with, that's gonna help. Then it's better than not leaving it blank. Definitely.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Hey, Johnny.
I would like to add to that like everything, it's a learning process, and even the AI, it's learning to identify. So if there is a plant in winter that what it is, and you want to take pictures of that and incorporate in iNaturalist, you'll be helping the algorithm to get better. So that, remember that all these systems work and based of how good the data is that they are working with. So if you know that is that plant and you want to incorporate those pictures, you're going to be helping the global project get better. So it doesn't matter whether it is winter, spring, or summer, you should be making observations for your learning process and also for the learning process of the tool that you like to use.
That's great. Thank you, Sarnella.
Thank you. We have a question. Do you have a couple of examples of how data is used in iNaturalist?
Well, research reports for phenology. Well, actually, let me give one example, and then maybe Stella can chime in as well. Like Alonso Abugadis, which we mentioned at the top of the hour, who's going to be speaking for Audubon Naturals later this week. He is the resources manager for Arlington County. He has shared that their county, they have looked at iNaturalist observations and to help inform them with their land management decisions. So when people are making observations of a bunch of invasives around a certain park, they're able to dispatch or maybe change their work plan to kind of accommodate for that. So resource management is one of the ways that people use the data, definitely.
And I would say phenology, you know, some of the biologists and ecologists in the Washington area do check iNaturalist to see what the community scientists are finding and what the timing is, because that really helps supplement their own direct research that they're able to do as part of their jobs.
It's a great question.
I'm curious whether any of the projects were of particular interest to you. Like, I know we have probably just 1 minute left, but I'm curious, you know, we mentioned so many projects and of course iNaturalist. I'm curious, like, which of the many projects you've heard about kind of tickle you or inspire you or pique your curiosity? Like, oh, I've got to try that.
And you can put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself, either way.
I've unmuted myself, and this is Lois Forster. Can you hear me? Hi, I do eBird, and that app really helps you learn about birding. Because if you don't know a bird, you can always go to Merlin, which is another app that's tied into eBird, and it can help you identify the bird. And you know, it's if you heard it, it might help you. You might get able to narrow down a bird. But I find that app fascinating, and I know it's used around the world. The amount of data they get from that is amazing, from input of birds around the world, and they use it for conservation reasons and just overall land use, and their concerns about development and overdevelopment and taking habitat away and so forth. So I really enjoy that.
Thanks, Lois. It looks like Lynn said she is interested in Dawn Chorus, which I hope you know that it's something that they just kind of did. Actually, when I was reading about the origins of it, you know, with the pandemic, the sudden silence that we're all experiencing in our communities, where people were able to hear things again because of less sound pollution. It was a very famous soundscape designer who goes around, and his name's Bernie Krause. He goes and collects sounds from the environment and does really cool stuff with them. And so that's how the project started. But now they said, yeah, they're going to do this no matter what moving forward every year. So I'm looking forward to see what that happens. We also have Andrew said he's going to check out the Lights Out program. So that's great. City Wildlife would love help with that, definitely. Yeah. Great. Well, we're so glad that you guys got some tips and information. And again, you know, feel free to follow up with us. I know Sarah and I will be sending out the recording and stuff. And if you guys want to follow what we're doing at Capital Nature, again, please follow us on social media and check out our website.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much. Just a brief reminder to everyone that we have 3 talks still left in October. Wednesday, which is tomorrow, Simon Johnson from the National Aquarium in Baltimore, taking a deep dive into the ocean vents. and the deep sea mysteries. On Friday, we're going to have the capital naturalist, Alonso Abugatas, with natural mysteries and little known facts. And he'll be touching on bioluminescence and fairy tales. I promise you it's going to be awesome. And then on Wednesday, we have from the creators of the 8-year-old Twinkie project, we get the zombie insect apocalypse. So thank you so much, Anna and Stella. This was such a wonderful presentation. We really thank you for all your contributions and your support to ANS. Thank you, Stella. Thank you, Anna. And
Thanks for having us. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everyone. We
Thank you.
loved having you every night. Have a good night.
Have a great night,
Everybody.
everybody.
Thank you so much. It was fascinating.
You.
Thanks.